Browser privacy, the truth about what your browser knows. Most people think using a different browser is enough to stay private online. It isn't. Every time you visit a website, your browser is giving away information about your device, information that can identify you even if you've cleared your cookies, opened an incognito window, or connected to a VPN. And here's the scary part. Nearly 90% of internet users are browsing with a browser made by just a handful of companies. So today, we're going to find out exactly what those browsers are leaking. I'll test the most popular browsers, rank them from worst to best for privacy, and then show you why even the best privacy browser still has one major limitation. Let's get into it. Before we begin, stick around until the end because I'll show you the browser setup I personally use to separate online identities, plus how you can get 2 gigabytes of free residential proxies to try it yourself. The first thing that usually comes to mind is a VPN. And don't get me wrong, a VPN is useful. It hides your IP address from websites and encrypts your internet connection. But that's only one piece of the puzzle. Your browser also plays a huge role because every website you visit isn't just looking at your IP address, it's also looking at your browser, the version you're running, your operating system, your screen resolution, your graphics hardware, your fonts, your language, even how your computer renders images. All of those tiny details are combined into something called a browser fingerprint. And unlike cookies, you can't simply delete it with one click. What is browser fingerprinting? Think about it this way. Imagine someone is trying to describe a person. If they only say he's wearing a black hoodie, that could describe thousands of people. But then they add, he's 6 feet tall, he has a scar on his left eyebrow, he's wearing red sneakers, and he has a silver watch. Suddenly, they're describing one very specific person. That's exactly how browser fingerprinting works. One signal doesn't identify you, but 20 signals together often do. Websites combine all those small details into one unique profile that can recognize your device across different sessions, which means clearing cookies isn't always enough. The browser itself can still give you away. So the question is, which browsers actually protect you? Let's test them. To keep things fair, I tested every browser on the same computer. Then I compared 5 things. First, telemetry. Does the browser send information back to the company that made it? Second, tracker blocking. Does it stop advertising and tracking scripts automatically? Third, fingerprint protection. How difficult is it for websites to uniquely identify your device? Fourth, network privacy. Does it help protect your IP address or prevent DNS leaks? And finally, transparency. Can security researchers inspect the browser's code, or is everything hidden behind closed doors? With that in mind, let's start at the bottom. The worst browsers for privacy. Unfortunately, the browsers most people use every day are also some of the weakest when it comes to privacy. The world's most popular browser collects a significant amount of diagnostic information and account-linked data. Its tracker blocking is limited by default. And although there have been improvements against fingerprinting, websites can still identify it fairly easily. The default browser on many Windows computers tells a similar story. It includes built-in tracking, sends diagnostic information back to its parent company, and focuses more on integration with the company's ecosystem than on protecting your privacy. Then we have Apple's browser. This one performs better. It blocks many trackers automatically and includes some privacy features out of the box. But it's still closed source, it's limited to Apple devices, and it doesn't completely solve fingerprinting. So while it's an improvement, it isn't perfect. And that's the important takeaway. Most people think choosing one of these browsers means they're already protected. But in reality, websites can still fingerprint them, track them across sessions, and in many cases, the browser company is still collecting data of its own. So, if those are the weakest options, what should you actually use instead? Now, we move into browsers that were actually designed with privacy in mind. Brave is probably the easiest recommendation for most people. It blocks trackers automatically. It blocks many ads before they even load. And it includes several fingerprinting protections without requiring any additional setup. Then there's Firefox. Firefox is open source, incredibly customizable, and with the right privacy settings, it becomes one of the strongest browsers available for everyday use. And finally, there's Tor browser. Tor goes further than almost anything else. Instead of sending your traffic directly to websites, it routes it through multiple encrypted relays, making it extremely difficult to trace back to you. The downside? It's noticeably slower. So if speed is your priority, Tor probably isn't your daily browser, but if maximum anonymity matters most, it's hard to beat. At this point, you might be thinking, great, I'll just install Brave or Firefox and I'm done. Not quite, because even the best privacy browser still has one problem that almost nobody talks about: the limitation. But what happens when you need completely separate online identities? An anti-detect browser is more like giving each profile an entirely different passport. Different appearance, different location, different identity. That's a completely different approach. I'm using GoLogin. There are other anti-detect browsers available, but this is the one I've personally found the easiest to work with. Let me show you why. I start by creating a new browser profile. I'll call this one Identities. Now I move to the proxy section. Here I'll paste in my residential proxy credentials. Residential proxies use IP addresses assigned by real internet providers, which makes them look much more like normal users compared to many data center IPs. Once I click Check Proxy, GoLogin verifies the connection, and if everything is working, you'll see the country and city appear automatically. Now I simply create the profile and launch it. That's it. Notice something interesting. I didn't manually change the language. I didn't change the time zone. I didn't edit the geolocation. GoLogin automatically matches those settings to the proxy location. That helps keep the browser profile internally consistent. Now let's verify the profile. I'm opening IP Hey. This is one of the easiest ways to see what your browser is actually exposing. And here's what we get. Residential IP, green. Fingerprint consistency, green. WebRTC leaks, none detected. Time zone, matches the proxy. Everything looks clean. Now, let's do something interesting. I'll create a second browser profile, this time using a completely different residential proxy. Launch it, open IPA again, and now look at the results. Different IP address, different browser fingerprint, different time zone, completely separate browser identity, yet they're both running on the same computer. That's the key difference. Instead of trying to reuse one browser identity for everything, each profile becomes its own isolated environment. When does this actually matter? Now. It's important to understand who this is for. If your work depends on keeping browser environments separate, maybe you're managing multiple client accounts, testing websites from different regions, keeping work and personal identities isolated, or using different browser environments for different projects. That's where separate browser profiles become valuable, not because they magically make you anonymous, but because they separate browser identities instead of sharing one. So here's what we've learned. Most popular browsers still collect telemetry and expose enough information for websites to build a browser fingerprint. Privacy-focused browsers like Brave, Firefox, and Tor dramatically improve that situation. They block trackers, reduce data collection, and make fingerprinting much harder. But they still give you one browser identity. Anti-detect browsers solve a different problem. Instead of protecting one identity, they let you create multiple isolated browser identities, each with its own fingerprint, its own cookies, and its own proxy. Neither replaces the other. They simply solve different problems. If you'd like to try the exact setup you saw in this video, I've left a link in the description and the pinned comment. Using that link, you can get 40% off GoLogin along with 2 GB of free residential proxies to test everything yourself. If you found this video useful, leave a like, subscribe if you're into browser privacy, cybersecurity, and online security tips, and let me know in the comments, which browser are you using right now? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.